Yeah, this video is in response to BGS Ibmore's recent video of Boomer's EL Rant. And I'm going to call this A Player's Eyes. BGS gave me the opportunity to listen to his video before he made it public. And the reality is, it made me feel some type of way. Because it forced me to really remember stuff that I had rather forget. And it's deeper than just saying I was an EL. Because the reality is I wasn't. The reality is, even in the days which I might have described myself as a nerdy kid, I really wasn't. Understand, I call this a player's eyes because I'm coming from the other side of it. Yeah, I had some stuff in the street. I was fighting in the street. I was a smart kid. But if I was fighting, it was never because I was smart. It was for whatever reason. Somebody was trying to take my money. Somebody was disrespecting me. But it was never because I was smart. In fact, where I was, usually my intelligence was respected. But at the same time, I was the type of dude, if you really wanted to be honest about it, I got along better with the thugs, the bad boys, the players. Looking back at it, it was in my blood. My father, straight up player, womanizing player. My grandfather, a Mac, a numbers running Mac. That was my maternal grandfather. My paternal grandfather, my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, who's still alive, consistently referred to him, because he's passed now, as a whoremonger. He probably has kids all over the place. My maternal grandfather, before he married my grandmother, already had a child out of wedlock. This was back in the 1930s. See, this thing goes back even beyond the drug era. That whole theme of a good girl getting with a bad guy. Because my maternal grandfather wasn't exactly a good guy, and my grandmother, she was a preacher's kid, a upper middle class preacher's kid at that. So this story goes back probably even further than that. Now, I understand where my brother BGS is coming from. All this bullshit that we seeing online, and women putting down the more nerdier guys, the smarter guys, the more intellectual guys, for really some bullshit ass reasons. We done seen this. We done seen this before. We done lived it. We trying to tell you. And see, we ain't like some of these punk ass niggas out here who ain't lived anything, grew up in a middle class environment, ain't experienced anything. Because back then, whether you were on the thug side or the nerdier side, you had to spend some time in the streets. Me and BGS, though we grew up coast apart, we learned things the same way that men did back in the day, in the streets, a real way. We didn't see shit online. We didn't watch no damn videos. So when that man speaks, y'all need to listen. Because that man paid his dues. I paid my dues. And any of these females on here who don't want to listen, or some punk ass nigga who grew up in a two-parent household who ain't experienced shit, whatever. I don't want to turn this into a rant because it's bigger than that. It's bigger than that. What that brother was talking about, he's trying to tell you, look, this is what happened. This is what we seen. Only thing we're seeing on only thing we're seeing on social media is a bunch of people on some bullshit, because we know how the story ends. Like I said, I'm not coming from the nerdier side. I'm coming from the player side. Now, I've gone on record as saying the thug thing is overblown. But Let me clarify that. The thug thing is overblown in the sense that it's not just the thugs getting to play. That's all. Because if we're going to be real about it, it's a good portion of them. I would say 30%, 30 to 50% of the men who are labeled as select by women, and in this case, black women, probably are like on some criminal shit. In fact, for whatever reason, which I still to this day can't understand, they glorifying it. But if you really take a look at the women glorifying it, it's those women who grew up sheltered. Because a funny thing, women who actually grew up in those hoods, they don't glorify those guys. And I've dated some women who grew up around some true to the game thugs in some very dysfunctional environments. They trying to get their asses out of there. They probably will not, under any circumstances, want to fuck with those type of men. But you get some women on social media, some of whom try to say, "Well, I grew up in the hood." No, you were probably a porch kid, because you always had those kids in the hood whose parents did not let them interact with other kids. Every hood had them. I don't care. The worst hood, they always get those kids. They either real religious, they something. Sometimes they can get through the neighborhood unscathed, but unfortunately, some of those kids get picked on. And I suspect a lot of men who may have come out of the hood who refuse to go back there might have been those type of kids. And I feel for y'all. I feel for y'all. But understand one part, and because there was so much that BGS talked about, and I have the video linked in the description box. And to understand where I'm coming from, I got how Ron Wills learned the game linked in the description box. I also have another video, the sexual shadow world. Now, people have a tendency to try to invalidate someone's personal experience. Like they'll say, well, that's just you. That's not what's happening out here. Bullshit. Okay? Because understand something. We're talking. Understand. All these brothers out here, I don't care where they at, whether they blue collar brothers, whether they're so-called educated lames, whether they're just some players, whether they just bad characters, whether they straight thugs. They're talking because every family, I don't care how upstanding they are, they got some relatives that everybody's watching their purse around at the family reunion, or you don't want them like going through your house, or you don't invite them over. In every family, everybody, and look, we all know the players. And the thing is, we're talking to each other because one thing I want to really bring up, one thing I really want to bring up is the whole thing which BGS addressed about the argument of some women that it's only the hood girls getting with the thugs. And that's really what everything comes down to. That's what everything comes down to, because the women complaining on social media about a shortage of good men really isn't that, as BGS would say, Keisha with the big butt from the hood. It's that educated woman, that woman with a degree, that woman that sounds articulate. She's the one complaining about a shortage of good men. But yet, she's ignoring her equivalent, that educated man, and chasing after that thug. Now, this isn't something we've seen it, but I have another perspective about that. Yeah, I could talk about what I've personally experienced, but understand, back in the late 80s, I had an internship which would start me in the criminal justice area. I was working with in a DC office, the DC courts, with a diagnostic probation unit. Diagnostic probation is basically this. Most people are familiar with what happens. After you get out of jail and stuff, you're on probation, yada yada. Diagnostic probation is before they go to jail. And the unit I worked with, their job was to recommend sentencing to a judge. And as an intern, first I worked with some probation officers, and then I was doing stuff myself. Basically, there were people either free or sitting some more time in prison because of my recommendation. And talking with them, you start finding out a lot about their personal lives. You start finding out that a lot of these so-called thugs, they weren't messing with Keisha from the hood. They were messing with Monica, who had that middle class and Catholic school education, who had that degree from that good school. We found this out a lot because later on, I would work as a criminal investigator for several defense attorneys. That was my business. That was one of my first businesses because I was independent. And I would talk to a lot of drug dealers, guys who've been charged with shooting somebody, even a few killers. The overwhelming majority did not have like a hood girlfriend. They were dealing with middle class women. Let me say that again. They were dealing with middle class women. I even had one case. You had a woman, older woman. She was supposed to be a witness. She dealing with this dude, a young boy, charged with some heinous crime. And I'll never forget the look on her son's face because he realized, he knew the nature of their relationship. And we've seen this. We see this. One of the things I wish women would do is stop insulting our intelligence. We're not sitting on the porch. We can go out here and see it with our own eyes. I've seen it. I've interviewed them. This ain't something like I'm not talking with some people. They just shooting the breeze. These some people trying to keep their asses out of prison, so they being honest with me. There have been times when I had to serve a subpoena on somebody at their girlfriend's place, and it's a nice middle class home. So we know what's happening. We know what's happening, and there's been so many occasions when I've known about a woman, like maybe a middle class professional, dealing with some thug type or some felon. I mean, we hear about those cases where women will deal, like prison guards and stuff, will deal with some prisoner. They're doing their bidding. Do not think for a second those are aberrations. Like I said, I worked in criminal justice. There's some stuff I can't discuss, but by the time something makes the news, for every one news story about it, there's 20 more instances where this is the case. And I mean, there's so much there, and we see it. And I'm gonna tell you what. And like I said, even going beyond that whole good girl and thug thing, as I may do a separate video on that because there is a dynamic there that I think I need to share with people, a deep psychological dynamic. But one of the problems, BGS has seen this. I've seen it. Anybody in their 40s and 50s have seen it. Even the women, we need some more women to truly speak up because they've seen it. Stop the bullshit. They've seen it. We've seen the picture. Women chase that bad boy, that player, that thug. They get burned. But then the same nerd, EL, or whatever that they talking trash about, that they try to put down, they want that man to come save them. That's where the issue comes in. Or, especially with black women, you go on national TV and talk about you're looking for a good man. But nobody asked the question, why are you passing over those men? Why were you downing those men? Why were you chasing those scuzzy type of men who didn't care about you? Cause let's be real. Let's be real. Like I said, I'm coming more from the player, bad boy, thug side. It is what it is. They don't give a fuck about you. You a cannon fodder to them. You just you just a cum receptacle for them. Let's be real. They will never love you. They will dog you. Why should they be loyal to you? They got five other women waiting to take your place. But you want to play that game or try to capture them because it's exciting. Yeah, there's a lot of women in therapy now because they chased an exciting man. So maybe that's the real issue. Maybe we got a lot of therapists on here who trying to increase the number of people, you know, number of women coming to see them. How many women on some type of drug? I knew one player. He said, "Hey, the way he got women, tease them with some Prozac, because that's the real deal." Meanwhile, the men who actually love you, devoted to you, who want to be with you, who accept your quirky ass self, you don't want to deal with them, and you come up with every excuse. Then you get on social media and attack them. And from my point of view, it looks stupid to me. I mean, really? Like I said, I come from the other side. One of the reasons I've written my book because so many men will come to me and say, "Rom, teach me how to be a dog." They said it just like they didn't say be in a good relationship. They said, "Rom, teach me how to be a dog," because that's how I used to roll. Do I feel bad because of any of it? No, because so many of the women I used to deal with had good men. See, that's another angle too. So many good girls are cheating on a good man. They'll have a good man. They'll have some dude that they might consider lame or safe or whatever. Then somebody like me would walk along, smile a little bit, and all of a sudden they getting wet. I've had it happen so many times. There used to be times I was working harder to keep somebody's relationship together than they were. And to be clear, these weren't hood chicks. These were women, you look at them, they were church girls. These were women who had degrees, who on the surface looked sensible until they dipped into that sexual shadow world. So I don't want this to be a ramble. You know, I did this video in support of my brother BGS and just a message for people. Listen, we've been through this before. BGS talked about it, his memory of it going back to the 80s and 70s. And, in my own family, that shit go back to the 30s. I'm the product of one of those good girl, bad boy relationships. Let me tell you, it's not pretty. It's not pretty. That shit affects several generations. And as BGS said in his video, this shouldn't be a discussion. This shouldn't even be a discussion. I can understand if you ain't attracted to one particular guy, but you going to tell me you constantly meeting educated men who you don't find attractive? Or is it that you just want to find a reason to keep messing with that thug dude or that bad boy dude or that player dude instead of doing something that's really in your own best interest? Yeah. So, that's my follow up. Take it or leave it. All right. Because I'm gonna put it in a different way. Like I said, I didn't come from the EL point of view. I came from the player point of view. Y'all can keep doing what y'all want to do. To me, it's like antelope who gonna keep going into a certain area and they know that line is sitting there. So I'm sitting there. So I benefit regardless. So if you want to keep going that way, go for it. You know. You know. Me and my family, hey, the men in my family, hey, we not worried about it. So it is what it is. Anyway, that's it. Later.